Hello, everybody. Welcome to Unexpected Points, the analytical man's or woman's podcast. I am Kevin Cole. I'm your host. We're going to go through all 12 Sunday games, not a full slate of Sunday games because of the fact that we had a couple of extra there on Thanksgiving, but no teams on bye this week. So we don't have a shortened week that we can fly through, but I do think we're going to get through some of these games pretty quickly this week because of the fact that either there weren't, real playoff implications, the quality of play was really that bad, that sort of stuff. There's not a whole lot of insight to be given for some of these games. And in fact, what was interesting about how the schedule laid out here, and the Sunday ended up being a lot better than what you would have thought based upon how the schedule laid out. There was only one game this week that was between two teams with winning records. Only one game, not this week, sorry, on Sunday. Only one game on Sunday between two teams that had winning records going into this. But when you have divisions like the NFC South, for instance, you don't need a winning record to have some playoff implications, some big playoff implications. And we'll talk about a couple of those teams soon enough when we get into the games. And we're going to start with the game that had the two winning teams. And that was when the Bengals went down to Nashville to take on the Tennessee Titans and came out victorious.
So the Bengals are in business. Burrow uncorks it. End zone. Touchdown. T. Higgins. Cincinnati takes the lead.
Yes, we had
one-on-one.
T. Higgins touchdown.
Higgins wins the battle against the rookie McCreary.
There. They end up taking the lead and hold on at the end of the game with some pretty interesting, I guess you could say, frustrating, if you're a Titans fan, plays here to wrap up the game. Before we get into the particulars there, let's start, as I always do, with the number of the game. The one number which I believe gives a little bit more insight versus what you may be hearing out there as to what happened in the game. And for this one, I think the number of the game is 6.7. Now, I track is pressure rate, but a lot of times pressures are created by the quarterback. If they hold the ball too long, it's something they really control. So what I like to look at is what I call quick pressure. So pressures that happen in less than 2.5 seconds, because that is the kind of average median time to pressure in the NFL. So only on 6.7% of dropbacks was Joe Burrow under pressure quickly in this game. 1 sack, 3 hits, 42 dropbacks. That is what I believe really allowed the Cincinnati offense and Joe Burrow to control this game and win this game. And when it comes to who they threw it to there, well, T. Higgins was the man. So T. Higgins, 7 catches, 114 yards, and a touchdown. That touchdown there came later on in the game to basically seal it there, give them the 2013 lead. And there's a few different things that happened in this game that I really want to get into. But before I get into some of the end of the game stuff and decision-making stuff, a few other high-level numbers, maybe like the second number of the game that I would point to is 12.6, and that's the pass rate over expectation for the Bengals. So they continue to lead into that. Whatever you want to say about Zach Taylor, he's figuring things out. He always figures things out about halfway through the season that, hey, maybe we should pass the ball. Even if Jamar Chase isn't there. And I think there was a lot of consternation and worry about Jamar Chase not being there for Bengals fans after a blowout loss where they looked completely inept on offense against the Browns that first week without Jamar Chase. Things have turned around the last couple of weeks after that. And now we have Jamar Chase, who will probably be back next week. Let's hit the high-level stuff for the game first before I get into all the details. Cincinnati at Tennessee, both teams now 7-4 coming out of this game. The Bengals were 1-point favorites, which doesn't mean a whole lot when you're between the threes there. 42.5 total ends up being a 36-point score, 20-16 Cincinnati wins. And the adjusted score, 25-19 Cincinnati. Cincinnati is really high up on my adjusted scores, the averages so far for this season. And now they're 7-4. They were one of those teams that had a losing record for a while, which my adjusted scores had them as probably more like a winning record sort of team, and they've come roaring back here. They haven't faced the stiffest competition on defense. So the offenses that they've faced haven't been the stiffest competition, but, Tennessee's not that bad. Tannehill's been playing well. Cincinnati still has a very, very hard schedule left to go, so we're not crowning them at this point, but a big victory for them in this game. Derrick Henry, 38 yards on 17 carries. That's probably the thing to point out. Again, with multiple weeks now of the Tennessee Titans offense struggling, the passing game, the drop back passing game added about 0.2 EPA per play, but then the rushes was negative 0.2. So this is a game where the Titans just could not get anything going on the ground. Similar sort of dynamic, honestly, with the Bengals, where the Bengals were adding about 0.17 EPA per play, dropping back to pass, and were losing about 0.13 expected points when rushing the ball, but they had a more concentrated, heavier passing game in this one, which ended up making the difference here. Big plays in this game, too. Yeah, the success rate was pretty low. Only 40% success rate for the Tennessee Titans offense. They did have a 69-yard catch and then the fumble into the end zone, which is recovered by Treylon Burks for a touchdown. That was a big play. They had a 51-yard catch for Treylon Burks on a contested target down the field. And then they also had a 25-yard catch on 3rd and 10 for Nick Westbrook-Akine. Those were huge EPA plays for the Titans, the 3 biggest plays of the game. And that's really what kept their offense afloat, because outside of that, they had a lot of issues. Burrow was decent. The running game was okay for the Bengals. Nothing hugely exciting there. It's just he really had a lot of time. Again, the 1 sack for 4 yards is really huge for Joe Burrow in this type of game, where that has been an Achilles heel for them in the past. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of decisions and things that happened at the end of this game. One, I'm going to talk about a 4th and 5 decision where the Tennessee had the ball. There was the 4th quarter, 6 minutes and 11 seconds to go. 6 minutes, 11 seconds to go. We don't really care about what the timeouts were left. Down 7, so it's 20-13 at this point. 4th and 5, 20 yards to go. Now, you're a little bit in this zone for the Titans where the field goal percentage, the chance that you're going to make a field goal, and again, this will be a 37-yard field goal, so an eminently makeable field goal right here, is so high that, and you're still 20 yards away from the end zone, so you're not right next to the end zone, where you can get it a little bit. You can get it a little bit that on this particular decision, you don't have a huge win probability gain just in the decision itself. It's only about a 1.1% win probability gain to decide to go for it versus the field goal attempt, because your success rate of making the field goal is, 90% versus success rate of converting the 4th down when you have 5 yards to go is maybe 40%. So because of that huge differential, when you calculate out your expected win probability under all scenarios, if you go for it, and versus all scenarios if you kick the field goal, it's not a huge difference there. But in these type of situations, what I really like to look at here is you think about your success rate probabilities on this. You definitely think about your success rate probabilities, but you also look at and you say, what is our win probability if we are successful on this 4th down and 5 play? Because there's only 6 minutes and 11 seconds left in this game. We want to win the game. You play to win the game. So even if there's only a marginal difference when you add up the fact that you're 60% likely, 60% chance that you don't convert on this play, and that puts you in a really bad spot if you don't convert here, and the win probability would only be 9% if you fail on this one. But if you do succeed, the estimated win probability, if they would have gone for it in this situation, the estimated win probability would have been 30%. Versus the field goal, you make the field goal, you're 18%. I don't know. I just really think that going from 18% up to 30%, a 12% gain, you're not doubling your win probability, but you're almost doubling your win probability. I guess I would just feel much, much, much more comfortable giving yourself a chance, even if it's a lower chance, giving yourself a chance to be at that 30% win probability, a significant chance of really having a chance to win, versus the field goal attempt only at 18%. Because, at that point, you kick it, you're still down. You're still down 4 points, and that's the way it ends. Now they could have gotten the ball back in this one. And that's the other play that I'll talk about that were due to an unfortunate penalty here. But I don't know. That's one I think that Vrabel, and if Vrabel does a lot of things really, really well, probably a little too conservative when it comes to some of the fourth down stuff in these games. The other play here, which was something that I've seen this definitely before, where the snapper on a field goal must be left untouched. You can't, blast into the snapper on a field goal until he has raised his head. And that was a play where it basically ended the game. There's 1 minute in, 53 seconds left to go. McPherson was going to attempt a 4th and 11 field goal from the Tennessee 13-yard line. And that's when the penalty happens. They would have gotten the ball back down by 7 points with basically a little bit under 2 minutes to go. Now, down by 7 points is something. It's not the greatest position, though, because even if you score the touchdown, you can either go to overtime or you can do the 2-point conversion, which then cuts your win probability in half then. So not only do you need the touchdown, you need the 2-pointer or the win in overtime. So it's not like they had a good chance of winning this game, even at that point in time, according to the win probability sort of numbers. So they're talking about before the penalty happens on this one. We assume the penalty would not have happened on this one. What sort of win probability did they have here? It was still maybe a 7-8% win probability. It's still very, very low that you get the ball back, score the touchdown, get the 2-point conversion, all those things underneath that sort of play and time. Although win probabilities are a little squirrely at the end of the game. But still, we're talking about maybe a 10%-ish sort of chance, if that. But, bad penalty, end of the game, ended the chances for the Titans here. Playoffs, we got to talk playoffs. What are we looking at here? How did this affect team probabilities? Well, the Bengals are now the second biggest gainer in playoff probability on the week. They're up to 76% playoff probability, 35% chance now to win the division. That is up 16% because of a spoiler alert, Ravens loss in this one. And when it comes to Tennessee, you still got a 93% chance to make the playoffs, 92% chance to win the division. Really much less important game for the Titans than it was an important game for the Bengals. And according to my numbers, again, when you look at the adjusted scores for the whole season, I don't know. Cincinnati's right up there with everyone else for how they've played. Now, I don't see them obviously as being as good of a team as the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. There's a second tier now of the top NFC teams. When we talk about Philly, we talk about the 49ers, and we talk about the Dallas Cowboys. But in that next tier, which is maybe a slight step down from that top NFC tier, I don't know. Cincinnati's right there with anyone else. I think they may be at the top of that next tier there. You might have Baltimore still being a little bit better, but I don't know. I think they're right at the top tier there. And if anything, Cincinnati might even be a better team than they had last year. That team that went to the Super Bowl doesn't mean they have they're going to make it the Super Bowl and they're going to do as well as they did last year. But I think internally, the way the offensive line is playing, again, no pressure in this game. The way the defense has been playing consistently the whole season, you have Jamar Chase coming back. This might actually be a better team here for the Bengals going forward. All right, next game I'm going to hit up here is the Baltimore Ravens that I talked about, the first of two-point conversions that we saw at the end of the game. Whether or not it's an analytics decision, I'll get into, but it was the right decision by the results, and that is Jacksonville Jaguars converting that and winning the game against the Baltimore Ravens.
Lawrence in the shotgun, looking left, throws left, and it's caught! Zay Jones! The Jags go up by 1!
Yes, Zay Jones. Props to Josh Norris of Underdog Fantasy. He's been hyping up Zay Jones for a while now. I wasn't sure if Zay Jones would ever actually get a meaningful week as far as fantasy was concerned, but we're gonna have to give him the props here for Zay Jones, because in this particular game here, we got Zay Jones, 11 catches, 145 yards in this one on 14 targets. The dominant option here in this one. And I want to give all the props to the Jags. We're going to talk about the late decisions for the Jags, our Jags. They've officially been deemed one of our teams when we talk about analytical people and the teams that we follow and we love. They're there. Peterson made the right decisions here despite not converting a 4th and 1 earlier in the game. But there are Ravens also, and a lot of things that they do. They didn't convert a 4th down also. But I think the turning point in this one, because I don't want it to get lost in the fact that Lamar Jackson was really, really good in this game, despite the fact that they didn't end up pulling it out. And the number of the game is a little bit of context here for Lamar Jackson. So 15.6 is the number of the game, and that's the dropped pass rate for the Ravens. They had 5 dropped passes in this game. 3 of them were in the end zone. And so one of those 3, the Ravens go on and they score a touchdown anyway. So maybe you can wipe that one off. It's not really a huge effect on the game, although it affects Lamar Jackson's like efficiency type of numbers that don't take account of the drops. But 2 of them were drives that the Ravens end up kicking field goals on. And you look at the plays, and again, drops always have this thing where rarely is a drop 100% on the receiver. Normally it's a little bit of it's a bit like you should catch that 70, 80% of the time. And that's kind of how these ones were. I don't think these were ones that were 100% on the receiver. The one for Mark Andrews that he dropped in the end zone was maybe close to being 100% on him. It's probably 85, 90% on him, but they end up scoring a touchdown on this one. They had a couple other drops, though, in the game, one by a tight end, one by Demarcus Robinson in the end zone, where they did not score. So that really ended up being a defining difference in this game, some of those dropped passes. The particulars on this one, Baltimore 7-4 also, along with the Bengals. So that's why now they are lockstep there in the AFC North. The Jags 4-7 on the year after this. A stat that I pointed out that, of course, Vikings Twitter took a little bit of offense to. I wasn't trying to even make it like a Vikings comment. I was trying to make it more a Jaguars comment, is that after this game, the Jags on the season have a positive 12-point differential. So they've scored 12 more points than their opponents throughout this entire season, yet they are 4-7. One of the few losing teams to have a positive point differential, especially being, 3 games under 500, having a positive point differential. And the Minnesota Vikings are +5 on the season. So they're better than the Minnesota Vikings, who are 8-2 this season, or 9-2 this season. And they're also better than the Tennessee Titans, who are only +4 on this season. Now, part of that is because they got completely blown out by the Buffalo Bills, but still +4 on the season, and they're a 7-4 team. This Jags team, I had mentioned before that I thought they were sneaky to potentially, not win out, but have a very strong last section of this season coming off of the bye. It starts this week. And it's also something where, if you can get your 2023 bets ready here, I think the Jaguars may be close to being, I don't know if they're the favorites, but they should be right there with maybe Tennessee, assuming Tannehill is coming back, for their chances of winning this division next year. All that being said, they win 28-27 on that 2-point conversion at the very end, but the adjusted score, because of the drop passes, because of the general offensive success of the Ravens actually were a little bit better according to the adjusted scores, 24-22. Trevor Lawrence, the talk is going to be about Lawrence in this game. Yeah, Lawrence was really, really good. 321 yards, 8.7 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. All that stuff's pretty good. Failed on the 4th and 1. How much is that on him versus the rest of the team? I don't know. 4 sacks, though, for 27 yards. Some of those pretty significant. That one that's a little disappointing for him. Something to keep an eye on in this game. Other things that happen. But again, let's go over to Lamar Jackson here, right? 89 rushing yards on 14 carries. Hugely important there. 254 passing yards, 7.9 yards per attempt, a touchdown, no interceptions. He did lose a fumble, though, on the 4th and 1 attempt, where it's not really a lost fumble. It's more like you're trying to desperately try to reach out and get it. And he actually had a higher expected points added per play. Well, basically the same as Trevor Lawrence in this game. So something to think about. Another good point for Lawrence. We talk about how he's been playing. Accuracy has been an issue for him. He was 12% over expectation, his completion percentage was 78% in this game, whereas you would have expected based upon depth of target, all that stuff, a 66% completion percentage. So he was over that amount. Decision time here. Let's talk about the decisions because a bunch of things happened at the end of this game that were hugely important. And it's decision, it's game management, it's how it all came together for the Jaguars. With one thing that I would say kind of went wrong for the Jaguars, or could have gone massively wrong for the Jaguars, and that was the squib kick at the end. But we'll get into that. So all the decision stuff here. So we're talking about the final drive here. Let's talk about the final drive for the Jaguars because this is what's important. And this is, they have the ball. It is, let's see. Well, it's not talking about the final drive, actually. Let's talk about a little bit earlier. They went for it on a 4th and 8, which I thought was pretty huge in this game. I'm sorry, a 4th and 5, which I thought was, no, sorry, 4th and 8. Let's go back to 4th and 8. So with 8 minutes and 44 seconds left. Okay, this is one, not the final drive. Let's rewind a little bit here. It's 19-10 Baltimore. So again, Baltimore almost had another one of these 10-point lead games that they end up losing eventually. 4th and 8 at the Baltimore 45-yard line. You're down 9 points. You have all of your timeouts, all of that sort of stuff. I could see a lot of teams not going for it in this situation. But it's one of those things where if you punt the ball, you have a 6% win probability. That's it. You go for it and you succeed, you're up to 14% win probability. It's just, more than doubling your chance of eventually winning the game. Trevor Lawrence has an awesome pass to Zay Jones, a 27-yard gain on that one. That one ends up being huge because if you look at that drive, that's a drive that eventually leads to a touchdown. They convert this. They have the ball at the 18-yard line. A number of plays later, they eventually get a touchdown on this game to cut it to make it 19-17. So huge decision there. Decisions you need to make where, if you don't make it, you're killing yourself, down 9 in this game potentially. But you have to go for it. You have to make it. Great decision there by Doug Peterson. In the final drive, a couple of big plays I thought were great decisions. One is right before the touchdown. So it's 3rd and 6. They have the ball at the 39-yard line. They get a 29-yard deep pass to Zay Jones, which takes them down to the Baltimore 10. This is an example. There's 30-something seconds left. This is an example where it's counting down. You're getting down to about 20 seconds left. This is an example where, I don't know, I would say 9 times out of 10, the coach gets down there, gets the ball at the 10, spikes it. Says, you know what, we don't have a lot of time left anyway. Let's just go ahead, spike the ball. We're not ready. I don't know what to do for a pass here. And we'll use those next 3 downs to potentially score. They don't spike the ball. I love it not spiking the ball. First of all, you get that down back. You might not have even had time for it necessarily to go through all 4 downs, but at least you have that probability. Number 2, have a play ready that you can just run, where they're basically kind of running a fade-ish sort of play, which ends up going to Marvin Jones for the touchdown. Just have that play ready and run it, because if it's incomplete, you stop the clock anyway right there, and you get a chance for a touchdown. And number 3 is, after a long play, not only is the offense a little bit out of whack, but the defense is a little bit out of whack. You've changed from being on the 39-yard line down to being in the 10-yard line. You're in a vastly different situation there defensively. If you're prepared and you're ready to go and you know what you're doing offensively in this situation, you have a huge advantage there. Have that preparedness, have that game management, be ready to go. So another check mark here for our Jaguars. We're ready to go in that situation. Gets the matchup they want, gets the touchdown. The 2-point conversion attempt. This is one that was like, is it or is it not a quote unquote analytics decision? This whole thing of like, is something an analytics decision or not, I think is a bit of a false dichotomy as far as what happens in these games. Analytics, and I'm going to go back to the Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah definition on this, is that it's about being thoughtful and being intentional. It's not necessarily about the tools. People always look at the tools. I agree that you can't know the win probability in the second quarter on your own 33-yard line on 4th and 1 without having some of these analytical tools. Whereas this type of decision, you say, we make it, we win, we miss it, we lose. what is that probability versus most likely going to overtime and winning or losing. So it's a little bit easier to figure out, but it's still like an intentional sort of thing. And it's still something where you have to think about at what point in time you are doing it, because there's only 14 seconds left on this play when they score the touchdown. That is the ideal time if you are going to go for 2 at the end of the game. You're the underdog. You're Jacksonville. You're a slight underdog in this game. So that's something to consider, which means you should want to end the game in regulation if you can. How good is your team at converting? You have a running quarterback who's pretty good at converting, so it gives you a decent conversion chance on this one. Although they don't end up running it, it's still something to think about. And with only 14 seconds, it's very, very unlikely the other team's going to have a chance to score and go ahead. If there is more time left in the game, if there's something like 30 seconds left in the game, you scoring that 2-point conversion gives the other team massive incentive to take all kinds of risks with the ball when they get it back to eventually end up scoring themselves and then winning the game. So this was it's still analytical in a way that you're thinking less than 30 seconds is when you want to do this. And that's the time they did in this game. Now, they almost made a massive mistake at the squib kick at the end because they squib kick it out there. I didn't see it happen because I was watching Red Zone, but the first play Baltimore runs on the next drive, again, down by a point with about 10 seconds left to go, is on their own 39-yard line. I understand you don't want to kick it deep necessarily and run the risk of a touchdown return, but make sure that squib kick gets beyond the 40-yard line, for God's sake, because they were able to, gain 12 yards and at least get an attempt, a 67-yard attempt, which ended up coming pretty woefully short, honestly, from Justin Tucker on that one, although it looked good in the air. But almost like that would have been like the mistake of the season if that squib kick would have given Baltimore enough room to enough advance here, starting at their own 40-yard line to get the field goal to eventually win the game. So it didn't end up happening. Our Jaguars still intact on this one. Playoff probabilities. Let's talk about that real fast coming out of this one. So Baltimore is one of the biggest losers of the week. Their chance to make the playoffs, which was extremely high, was in the 90-something%, is now down to 84%. Their chance to win the division down 17% to 62%. So it's really them and the Bengals now. They have an easier schedule than the Bengals do going forward. So that's going to help them in this one. But it's gone down from being like they were almost a lock to win the division, near 80% to win the division. Now about doubling the chances that the Bengals will end up winning this one and winning the division going forward. Again, keep an eye on our Jaguars going forward, especially for the 2023 season. All right, let's go to Cleveland here. Another one of the teams that adjusted scores love so much, and they come through in this one on the third possession of overtime with a long pass to Amari Cooper, which eventually sets up a touchdown.
Brissett looking to throw on third down. There he goes to Cooper. Wide open. Cooper makes the catch inside the 10 to the 5 and tackled at the 2.
Yes. Amari Cooper down to the 2-yard line, making up for maybe it was one of the worst drops of the season. We talk about drops, whether they're, 100% or 50% on the receiver. This was like 100% one on the receiver where Amari Cooper had a massive drop on a 4th and 9 that the Browns would have converted earlier in this game, but still ends up with 7 catches, 94 yards, including this catch down to the 2 where they eventually plunge it in with Nick Chubb a little bit later in this game. And I think coming out of this game, what you're going to be hearing a lot about potentially is Jacoby Brissett, maybe, him coming through with a victory in his last game, whether or not he should be a starter next year, how many quarterbacks is he better than, and this and that. Brissett actually wasn't that great in this game. He had negative expected points added per play. He was okay. He was fine. His the 5.7 yards per attempt, 4 sacks. The sacks came back. That's always really bad for Brissett. 4 sacks for 32 yards. So he was fine. He just wasn't, he didn't win this game for him. He didn't play nearly as well as you'd seen him play in other games in this one. Tom Brady was slightly better by the EPA numbers in this game. What we really want to go to, if we're going to talk about the numbers of the game, and I think you want to go to the much maligned Cleveland Browns defense in this one. 7 is the number of the game, and that is the Bucs failed to score any points on 7 straight drives to end the game in this one, including a drive that they had in overtime. Or again, in overtime, they only needed a field goal because the Browns had the ball first. They get the ball. All they need is a field goal to win. Can't get down the field. Can't score a field goal on this one. Really, really tough game there for the Bucs. And if we look at the big plays of the game, and surprisingly in this one, again, well, actually, let's get the particulars here. So the Bucs are 5-6 coming out of this. Cleveland's 4-7. According to my adjusted scores, Cleveland would be 8-3 if you just went by the adjusted scores this season. So obviously, you don't play for adjusted scores, you play for real scores. But at least it's an idea of like, God, they really had a great chance. If you're a Browns fan, you're kicking yourself right now with Deshaun Watson coming back. This easily could have been a team that was, at worst 5-6, maybe 6-5. Handing it over to Watson. Now you're 4-7. You basically got to win out here, win 5 in a row or 6 in a row, to have a chance in the AFC, in a pretty stacked AFC here. Tampa Bay was a 3-point favorite in this game. Cleveland wins by 6. The adjusted score 22-20, a little bit more narrow towards Cleveland. There's a few reasons for that. One is, they got the 4th and 10 conversion on an unbelievable one-handed catch from David Njoku near the end. So there's that one there. We also had the 4th biggest play of the game was a 31-yard end around from Anthony Schwartz for a touchdown. You don't see that happen that much. I guess it was a reverse, actually, to Anthony Schwartz for a touchdown. You don't necessarily see that one happen that often. They got unlucky on the 4th down, as I mentioned, but they had a couple lucky plays that go in their favor, which ends up making it a little bit more narrow than you think in this one. What do we have to say about Tampa Bay? Like, they're given every opportunity here to run away with this division. They still have a 75% chance to make the playoffs after this, a 73% chance to win the division. The Falcons and the Saints are doing them favors by not winning any games yet. They just can't win. Just can't do anything. Like, do something. Bucs. You look at this division here in the NFC South. The Bucs are still leading by half a game over the Atlanta Falcons. They're 5-6. The Falcons are 5-7. Every team in the division has a negative point differential now. Even the Panthers and the Saints at 4-8 are only a game and a half out at this point. I mean, they have a pretty low chance of either one of those teams of being able to come back and win, but still, only a game and a half out at this point. The Bucs are a little bit in a fortunate situation of having a bottom 10 schedule as far as how difficult it is. Not a very difficult schedule going forward, so that's going to help them here. Again, still 73% chance to win the division just because we do not see the Falcons or other teams as being very good, but anything can happen here, and you're just giving more and more and more chances. The Bucs are giving their opponents to eventually be able to get back into this and take away the division for them. Where do the Browns stand at this game right now? Well, 5% chance to make the playoffs. So again, that's about their chance to go ahead and win out in this one. About a league average schedule. Starting next week, Deshaun Watson, the quarterback, against the Houston Texans. So that's probably a W you can at least pencil in at this point. All right, let's go to the Jets, the Mike White era. Has the Mike White era begun? I don't know. Should we be talking about the Mike White era? It's a victory, though, and it may be against the Bears defense, which, it's not that challenging, but it's still a victory for Mike White as he unlocks Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, and the other Jets receivers.
A deep drop lets the routes develop. One of his first downfield shots has Garrett Wilson. Makes them miss. Turns on the afterburners. He's gone. Touchdown Jets. New York takes the lead.
Yeah, it was a little surprising. We're talking about New York taking the lead here. It was a little bit surprising that the Bears, it faded quickly, but the Bears were kind of hanging in there for a little bit, and then they just, refused to score the rest of the game. We started to wonder about this vaunted Jets defense a little bit early in this game. But let's talk about Mike White, because he's the man of the hour, or the man of the week in New York City. The number of the game is 16.7. So that's the expected points added on Mike White plays in this game. So when he dropped back to pass on those plays, the Jets added 16.7 more points than would have been expected. If we look back and we say, Zach Wilson The highest total that Zach Wilson has this season in his 7 starts is a little bit over 2. So 16.7 versus 2 for Zach Wilson so far this season. The most Zach Wilson has in his career is around 8.7 last year against the Jaguars. He had a the crumbling Jaguars. He had a decent game, but still about half of the expected points added that we have for Mike White in this game. Yeah, he had an easy opponent, but guess what? What you do is you beat easy opponents. Good teams beat easy opponents. So we can only play who's in front of you. Mike White ends the game with 0.6 EPA per play, which is an outstanding number. He has a short ADOT. Now, this is going to be his thing. 5.8 yards on the ADOT. He's not going to stretch the field. That was one of the few plays where he stretched the field, and it was a little squirrely, honestly, throwing it into a bunch of coverage here, and Garrett Wilson makes a play and takes it down the field. But 8.6 completion percentage over expected. You just, do the easy stuff, right? Do the easy stuff. Sometimes you're going to get the 56-yard touchdown by just completing the pass, but sometimes you just got to, matriculate the ball down the field, and he completes 78.6% of his completions of his passes versus a 70% expectation in the game. Jets are pretty good running the ball too, which is great. They're about a 50-50 run-pass ratio. They didn't have to run it a lot, especially in the second half in this one. And again, the Bears started off okay. They ran the ball fairly well in this game, but then the passing game fell apart down the stretch. And outside of a, Sauce Gardner got dealt with by Chase Claypool on one play that went down the sideline, which was one of the bigger plays. The second biggest play, actually the biggest play of the game for the Bears offense, was a 31-yard catch down the sideline where there was a DPI that ended up being declined on this one. Other than that, not a whole lot going on for this Bears offense. Again, doing what you need to do here, plus getting some big plays. Like, let your receivers, let these first round, second round, high draft pick receivers do things for you, right? 2 biggest plays for the Jets, that 54-yard touchdown there, which is 4.6 expected points added. They also had a 42-yard touchdown to Elijah Moore, 3.6 expected points added. Let's do it. A 22-yard touchdown to Elijah Moore, 2.9 expected points added. That's how you do things, just let those guys make plays for you. Elijah Moore, though, he only had those 2 catches because, again, it wasn't a pass-heavy volume sort of game, but still looking really good there. Tyler Conklin adding 50 yards. Zonovan Knight, they didn't even know this guy existed, quite honestly. Actually, I did know he existed, but I didn't think he was going to be jumping over James Robinson in the depth chart. And I know Michael Carter got a little bit injured in this game, an ankle injury, but Knight ended up 14 yards and 69 carries, and then also had 3 catches for 34 yards. So I don't know if Carter stays injured. Fantasy footballers, maybe you could look at what to do with Knight in this game. That is weird situation with quarterbacking where it was like Trevor Siemian's going to start, then he hurt his oblique, then it was going to be Nathan Peterman, and then it was back to Trevor Siemian. Not a whole lot to talk about, though, because it wasn't the most meaningful game, but meaningful from the perspective of Mike White. Definitely established himself for another week here. The Jets up to 7-4 on the season. That's meaningful. They cover. Congratulations, as 9-point favorites, 31-10 in this game. And the adjusted score, 26-16. So again, there were some of those big plays there, but let's give them credit where they belong. And playoff-wise, not a huge difference in the playoffs because they were such a huge favorite in this game. They were expected to win this game. They move up a few percent here. They're up to about a little bit under 60% chance to make the playoffs. So the Jets are in the hunt. And this is why you had to make the move. This is why I advocated for it on last Tuesday's pod. You had to make this move because you got to make the playoffs. This is your chance. Let's do it, Jets, while you have this defense, because you just don't know if you're going to have the same sort of defense in play next season. All right. A game with surprisingly high playoff implications we're going to go to next in the morning, and that's when the Falcons go against the Washington Commanders. And Mariota keeps on having these decent games in terms of optically, like his efficiency, but near the end, mistakes happen, whether it's tipped or not or whatever ends up happening here. The Commanders' defense, which has been playing extremely well, especially since week 6, comes through at the end to secure the victory.
Mariota, the pass, it's deflected in the air. It is picked picked off potentially by Washington. It is. It's Kendall Fuller.
Yes, Kendall Fuller with the game-sealing interception with 1 minute left, right on the goal line in this one. And let's go ahead and get into implications when it comes to the number of the game on this one. And we're going to say 21. Commanders playoff probability up 21% based on all the different action that we saw this week. It's not only did they win, Bucs lose. Of course, they beat the Falcons, which is one of their competitors for getting one of these last playoff spots in the NFC. The Giants lose earlier in the week. That helps them out a bit. Green Bay loses, which kind of throws some dirt on them. It's pretty much done. The New Orleans Saints lose. The Seattle Seahawks lose. The Arizona Cardinals lose. All these teams losing here. All that combines to give a 20% jump to the Commanders here. They're up to 68% chance to win the playoffs. And we're talking about a wild card here. They're not going to win the division right now. Basically no chance of them winning the division. But hey, they're locked in. They're 7-5. They're more than frisky at this point. They were 3.5-point favorites in this game. They win 19-13. The adjusted score 23-20 towards the Commanders. So, a little bit more narrow than the actual score, but not a whole lot more narrow. One other thing to talk about, and this is from PFF Timo Riske talking about the Commanders and the run that they've been on here, the improbability of the run they've been on here. Maybe Commanders fans are going to start hating me after a while if they continue to win and make the playoffs. So since week 6, and some of this includes some Carson Wentz games in here, since week 6, the Commanders have generated negative 0.08 EPA per pass play, which ranks 27th out of 32 NFL teams. Their record is 6-1 in that time span, the best record in the NFL since week 6. The Eagles are 5-1, so they're close. But 6-1 record since week 6 for the Commandos. Yet they're not playing that well, but they are 6-1 and they're charging toward the playoffs. Again, you log those victories, right? Who cares what nerds like me are saying about you when it's the Vikings or it's the Commanders or whoever? As long as you're logging those victories, we are going to recognize the fact that you have a pretty good shot now at making the playoffs. Heineke didn't really do that much in this game. 23 pass attempts for 138 yards, 6 yards per attempt. He had a pick in this one. Brian Robinson, huge Brian Robinson game. 18 carries for 105 yards. He had someone who didn't really look like he had a ton of juice, but he had some big plays in this game, a 21-yard rush in this game. He also had 2 catches for 20 yards and a touchdown where he showed a lot of power and balance there. So maybe he's getting back into the swing of things after having had the gunshot wound earlier this year, which is a weird thing to talk about for players. You probably don't have a lot of experience of how long does it take you to get right from a gunshot wound. But it seems like Brian Robinson, at least in this game, looked like he got right against, not the greatest defense for the Falcons. Again, it was a game where Mariota was okay. His EPA per play was basically flat, and that includes that interception, that tipped interception at the end of the game there, which was the biggest play of the game, which took their win probability down from about being a 50% chance to win to the game being over on this one. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like they're going to make the move to Desmond Ridder. Again, they're not eliminated from the playoffs, so maybe they'll continue to wait for them to be eliminated. They're still sitting, according to our numbers, with about a 15-20% chance to make the playoffs. They're only half a game behind the Bucs at this point, so they're probably not going to make that move to Ridder. Based upon Mariota, who again had 49 yards rushing. That's been a secret weapon that he's had that's helped keep his numbers afloat this entire time. But when you look at the offense, not scoring points, only 13 points, and running the ball, they've just been so good running the ball. Part of that is Mariota, again, but still running the ball, they were adding about 0.2 EPA per play, 55% success rate running the ball, negative 0.2, 38% success rate dropping back to pass. Now, they barely dropped back to pass. They ran more than pass in this game. They were about 15% under expectation as far as their pass rate. So they continue to lean heavily into the run. So maybe it doesn't matter who their quarterback is according to that. But I don't know. Probably should be Ridder time. but we'll see exactly what ends up happening in this one. Commanders, lock it in, though. We're talking about the hated Commanders, at least when it comes to their ownership, sitting with a cool, very nice 69% chance to make the playoffs at this point. All right, let's finish up some of these morning games here. Not the most exciting stuff. Miami handles its business at home against the Houston Texans.
179 yards a game on the ground.
Tagovailoa looking, now giving chase. Here comes Houston. Tua to the end zone. Touchdown. Durham Smythe. Just masterful from Tagovailoa.
Tua with the score to open the game, a few more scores thereafter. Maybe if you look at the final score, you see 30-15 and you think, oh, not a bad effort. But I think most people were aware of kind of how this one broke down. And that goes to the number of the game here, which is 8. So the Texans either punted or turned it over, including 1 fumble 6 on 8 straight drives to begin this game. Whereas the Dolphins started field goal, touchdown. They did punt. Touchdown, field goal, 27-0 at halftime. I'm sorry, 30-0 at halftime. And then, the Texans get a couple of scores later on in the game. My boy, Skylar Thompson, did not come to play in the second half here. He only had 10 plays, but still lost about 10 expected points on his 10 plays. Tua didn't have the greatest game, but I think he'll still maintain being number 1 in EPA per play, since he did add about 0.25 EPA per play in this game. Where will he stand? Let's look really quickly in grading right now on the season. Now, some of this is subject to review, but where does Tua sit here for grading so far in the season? Because remember, he was number 1 in passing grade too. So let's pull this up. What do we have here? Still number 1. So he's still, according to these numbers not been confirmed yet, still number 1 passing grade in the NFL, 91.2. Patrick Mahomes second at 89. Joe Burrow third at 85. So a decent distance between him and Burrow at number 3. Is there a lot to talk about in this game? I don't know. Like I said, Tua handled business while he was in there. They were up big. Kyle Allen stunk. Negative 0.3 EPA per play, 5% completions under expected, only a 5 ADOT. It was not stretching the ball at all down the field. The rushing game was okay for Houston. I'm sure anyone who has Dameon Pierce on their fantasy team is just hating life recently. 5 carries, 8 yards. Dare Ogunbowale. Yeah, didn't nail that one. 14 yards, and he ends up getting the touchdown, so that probably did not make Dameon Pierce fantasy managers very happy there. Again, nothing else really to talk about this game. Log the victory that you needed to get, move on in life. Miami, 90% chance to make the playoffs now, been moving up steadily each and every week. 30% chance to win the division, 8-3 on the season. Adjusted score only 17-6 Miami. So a low adjusted score. Miami was getting some longer plays and some conversions than you wouldn't necessarily expect early in the game. And it was really held down by just like how god awful the numbers were in the second half. Again, this is kind of a game we can just throw away and not really worry about the implications, other than the fact that Miami logs the W in this one. Another game that we could probably throw away, the Broncos wish they could throw away. They wish they could throw away this entire season, and that's when they went to Carolina. And the Panthers are winning again.
Darnold for the end zone. DJ Moore has it, and that's a Panther touchdown.
Yes. A Panther touchdown. DJ Moore is back. Sam Darnold unlocking DJ Moore here. 4 catches, 103 yards, and a touchdown. Sam Darnold didn't have to do a whole lot because of how inept the Denver Broncos offense was. 164 yards on 19 attempts. 8.6, though, per attempt. So that's all you can measure is per attempt. Didn't take any sacks against a good Broncos defense, so that's pretty good. And he also had a touchdown. He had this thing where he kind of fumbled the ball, recovered it, and then rolled into the end zone for a touchdown there. His EPA per play, about 0.3 EPA per play. So not bad at all. Not a lot of plays, but not bad at all for Darnold. Okay, talking about the game, though. Broncos offense continues to be the story. There's no other way to talk about it. Worst trade in history people are talking about for this one. We'll see. Still a little early on the Russell Wilson trade, but the number of the game is -9. That was the net passing yards, so netting out sacks for the Broncos through their first 5 drives of the game. Russell Wilson finishes, and he scored some at the end of this game. He put together a little bit at the end of this game. Finishes with 125 yards on 35 passing attempts. So some quick math there. That is 3.5 net yards per attempt. 3 sacks for 17 yards as part of that. Latavius Murray was actually running the ball well, 6.4 yards per carry. The Denver offense, it's just the passing offense cannot get anything done. We saw a little drama with some defensive players yelling at Russell Wilson, everything else there. Again, there's not much that they can do to get out of this contract here in the near future. Nathaniel Hackett is pretty much a dead man walking. They probably roll him through the end of the season, but I don't see there's any chance of him coming back here. Starting to get some buzz here for Steve Wilks potentially coming back for the Panthers. I'm not sure. We'll see. I think Tepper will be the owner for the Panthers, will be a little bit too tempted to look to see where else he could go and spend some money, overpay for a coach like he did for Matt Rule, and potentially bring someone of his choosing in on this one. And we also have to think about, I know they're 3-3 since Wilks has taken over versus being bad before. But when you think about interim coaches, and you also think about new head coaches for the season, head coaches very often, new first-year head coaches very often win Coach of the Year. And one of the reasons is that, let's say you have how a team is playing versus their underlying strength, right? Versus their real underlying strength, because you have this variance on how you play. So it goes up and down. It's kind of like a wave, a wave, another wave, another wave. It goes up and down. So if you're going to replace a coach, whether it's an interim head coach or a new coach the next season, very unlikely you're going to be replacing them when you're on the top of a wave. You're probably going to be replacing them on the bottom of a wave. So when a team gets a little bit of a bounce going forward, how much you want to attribute specifically to the coach, and it's not just for Wilks here. I'm not trying to downgrade Wilks. This is just like an overall thematic sort of issue. Whether it's Jeff Saturday, it's Wilks, it's Kevin O'Connell taking over this year for the Vikings, all that sort of stuff. You think how the team's playing versus their underlying talent versus their underlying strength is normally low. So the new coaches get a little bit of a boost, like they're more likely than not to do better going forward. If they want to roll with Wilks, I think he's looking more than functionally good. I don't see any problem with that, of course, at all going into next season, but I guess I'm skeptical that that's what Tepper will end up doing. All right, let's toss this game aside. Let's get out of here. Relatively unharmed. Let's get into the afternoon games here, and we're going to start in Arizona with the Cardinals actually playing pretty well, but then again, another 2-point conversion, another successful 2-point conversion with about less than 20 seconds to go. This time for the Los Angeles Chargers.
Trying for 2. Got it! They've got the lead! It's the tight end, Jared Everett!
They got the lead there. The Chargers score right at the end of the game. They end up winning 25-24. Nice little setup here on this Gerald Everett play. I mean, maybe it was Isaiah Simmons being lost defensively, but man, was that an easy one. We had a lot of directionally guys going a few different directions. A little late release for Gerald Everett. He ends up being wide open. They convert the 2, and they win the game. Number of the game here. Cardinals offense was actually good in this one. Pretty good offense in this one, despite the fact that they scored 24 points, which isn't fantastic, but it's not bad. But we have to highlight, and this is going to be like something that Cliff Kingsbury is going to be asked about. 0 is the number of the game, and that's the Cardinals' first downs. So even getting a first down in the fourth quarter of the game on 4 different possessions that they have. I'm going to include the last possession. I know they barely had any time, but they look so woefully inept even on that possession in the couple of plays that they had. Then I'm going to go ahead and throw it in there, which allowed the comeback in this one, because my adjusted score actually had the Cardinals being better, 24-19 in this game, even though they lost 25-24. You look at some of the overall numbers for the game. 5.7 yards per play for the Cardinals versus 4.9 for the Chargers. The bad luck plays, the big bad luck plays for the Cardinals. James Conner had a fumble. They missed a 49-yard field goal, which is not, a super makeable one, but it's one that you should make. They had a failure on a 4th and 1. Those are big, big plays. The James Conner fumble was the most impactful play of the game, negative 5.3 expected points. And you go back a little bit further, the 4th most impactful play of the game is the missed field goal, negative 3.5 expected points. And then even further, negative 2.2 expected points for that interception, which came on the 4th and 1. So, God, just a few plays can make a huge, huge, huge difference in this one because they played well, I think, internally. They got pressure on Herbert. And I don't know if this is a Herbert thing. This is just the offensive line completely falling apart because Herbert had been the best at avoiding sacks this season up until a couple of weeks ago because he had 4 sacks in this game. He had 5 last week. So he had 10 sacks in his first 8 games of the season. Herbert, and this is when he was just, super outstanding. I know they lost Slater. They lost some other guys on the offensive line, so that's definitely part of this. 10 sacks in first 8 games. Now he has 11 sacks over the last 3 games. 3.7 yard average depth of target for Herbert in this game. So he's taking 4 sacks despite the fact that they're not trying almost at all to throw the ball down the field. I mean, Kyler Murray had a 10.1 ADOT in this game. Kyler Murray averaged 0.3 expected points per play. Justin Herbert, 0.1. So Herbert didn't have a bad game, but not a good game there by any stretch of the imagination. 5.8 yards per attempt, and then you net out the 28 sack yards, and it goes well below 5 here for Herbert in this game. Hey, anyway, you get the W's, you get the W's, right? Going to decision making here, Staley is just, he's not been our chosen one anymore this season. They end up winning the game, but there was one decision where they had the ball 4th and 6 on the Arizona 48. Kind of similar decision as we saw Doug Peterson went for it in a similar type of decision here, where there was 10 minutes and 59 seconds left in the 4th quarter. They're in the dead zone there. You can't kick a field goal. It's 4th and 6. You have Justin Herbert as your quarterback. Nope, they punted it. It was the worst decision of the week, according to win probability added. They would have added 4.5 win probability. They ended up winning the game. You still win the game, even if you make some bad decisions. But Staley continues to do this stuff, which is a little bit tilting. Where do the Chargers stand now in the standings? Well, the Chargers are 5-5. So actually, that can't be 5-5. They have to have one more game here. Are they 6-5? The Chargers are 6-5. My apologies. And that puts them in a very tough AFC, a 41% chance to make the playoffs. Basically, no chance to win the division at this point. 41% chance to make the playoffs. Not bad. What's their schedule coming up here? That's going to determine a lot of this because they have about a league average-ish sort of schedule going forward. And again, offensive line is not doing so hot. They face the Raiders, who are pretty good, actually, at the Raiders. That's one, I'm not sure the Chargers will even be favored in that game. Maybe a point or something like that. They're going at home against the Miami Dolphins. There'll probably be a lot of Dolphins fans at that game. Titans, Colts, Rams, who, the Rams might have shut down the entire season by then. And then the Broncos at Denver to end the season. That'll be at least an interesting one. It's never easy to play in Denver. Could be some snowy conditions there in early January. And maybe the Broncos will try to make a statement at the end of the year and do something, right, to end up winning this game. Cardinals, obviously, we forked them. They are done. They're out. They're not in the playoffs. We'll see all the discussion about Kingsbury and Steve Keim and all that. Maybe they'll be more likely to let Kingsbury go now that we've seen Matt Rule get a coaching job, and all that guarantee money that he had, I believe, is offset by the fact that he's going to make tons and tons of money for Nebraska now. So I don't know if Kingsbury is going to get a job as easily, but maybe if they fire Kingsbury, they can keep their fingers crossed that he won't just decide to, count checks and hang out on the beach in California, going after beach babes all day long. And he'll actually want to go coach in college again, and they can offset some of that money that they just signed him to a 5-year extension in the offseason. All right, let's go to maybe the game of the afternoon here, an overtime win for the Las Vegas Raiders against the Fighting Geno Smiths, all done in Seattle, and Josh Jacobs is the story of the game.
Jacobs with running room right up the middle. Jacobs is on his way. The Raiders are going to win this game.
Yes, Josh Jacobs with a walk-off touchdown to end this game. And 86 yards, walk-off touchdown, third possession of overtime. This is another game. We had 3 possessions with teams, not scoring at all on the first couple of possessions. Third possession of overtime here. So Seattle had their chances. Geno Smith had his chance to win this game. But we have to talk about Jacobs and the number of the game here, 176. That is the yards after contact for Josh Jacobs in this game. 176 yards after contact in this game. And of course, in total, 39 touches for Josh Jacobs, 303 total yards, and 2 touchdowns. So yeah, he got the 86-yard touchdown at the end to boost up his stats, but still, you take that away, you're still well over 200 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, the fantasy football player of the year, the league winner of the year. I think he's second in fantasy football scoring amongst running backs, and he was like, 7th, 8th, 9th round pick or something like that. So the man of the year in fantasy football, which of course we care about a lot on this podcast. I have the records backwards on this one. So the Raiders are now 4-7. So, hey, not great or anything, but at least maybe going to keep Josh McDaniels' job. Although I think he would have kept his job. I think almost no matter what, just being the type of person, and a little bit of gravitas there for him, right? So I think he would have kept his job no matter what, but at least playing him into some victories here. And again, they have that Chargers matchup next week, which is going to be big. They can continue to, maybe stack some wins here at the end of the season. They need to definitely win out in order to have a chance to make it into the playoffs. So can they win 6 straight games? Probably not, but there's a little smidgen of hope here. A lot of points scored in this one, 40-34 for Vegas. And the adjusted score has it being about an even game, 29-28. Geno's one of these guys where he always has the completion percentage over expected, but I feel like almost like he makes things too difficult on himself, or the offense makes it too difficult for him, because he's 10% completions over expected, but his EPA per play is positive at 0.12, but not like nearly as big of a number as you might expect. 8.9 yards per attempt, which is really, really good, but he has a tendency to take sacks. Also 3 sacks for 21 yards in this one. He had a pick, and then he had another dropped interception in the end zone. So his grading is not going to be that great on this one. They're starting to, a little bit of the shine is coming off of Geno. He's still 7th in passing grade this season, so it's not like he's falling that far. But in the next couple of weeks through the end of the season, we'll see if he maintains that number in the top 10 for the rest of the year. Going to playoff chances here, and the Raiders sit there with a cool 5% chance to make the playoffs. So 1 out of every 20 seasons, 1 every 20 times, they can come back here and make the playoffs. And the playoff differential loss here, Seattle down 10%, down to 56% chance to make the playoffs according to our numbers. I think they're a little bit higher in the market right now for their chance to make it, but we're going to have to concentrate here on the schedule. They have a middling schedule going forward, but with San Francisco pulling away, it's really going to be competing for that wild card spot. And they're going to need some teams to start losing. They're going to need the Commanders to start losing. They're going to need the Giants to continue losing. They have the Rams next week, so that's a pretty good timing for them, because I don't think Matthew Stafford's going to be back for that one. So they got the Rams, then the Panthers. Okay, that's a pretty good 2-game stretch for them. Then at home against the 49ers, which will be a huge game, at Kansas City, at home against the Jets, who are pretty good, and then the Rams again. So if Matthew Stafford doesn't come back, you might be logging like 2 pretty easy W's against the Rams for them. Then you got the Panthers. And then you say, we just got to win a game against Kansas City, San Francisco, and the Jets. We got to win one of those. And if you can win one of those, that'll be logging 4 more victories here. You add 4 wins, they'll be 10-7. Probably be good enough to get them in. So I like Seattle's chances to make the to make the playoffs this year and continue going forward. One thing to think about, though, kind of like under the radar, maybe-ish sort of disappointment for Kenneth Walker, because he keeps on getting touchdowns. He got 2 touchdowns in this game, but 26 yards on 14 carries, 1.9 yards per carry. Over the last 2 weeks, 43 yards on 24 carries. So less than 2 yards per carry the last 2 weeks for Walker. There's actually some bad decisioning here by Josh McDaniel. 4th and 1, down 3, 7 yards from the own opponent, end zone in the third quarter. They did not go for it. It was a very, very strong go for it. I mean, they end up winning the game, but of course they had to go to overtime in the third possession of overtime in order to do it. All right, let's get to the defensive effort of the week, maybe. I don't know. There's some turnovers as part of this here. The San Francisco 49ers shut out the New Orleans Saints.
Throws it short. Kamara at the 3, at the 2. Ball is out! Ball is out! Caromming around, pinballing around at the 1-yard line. San Francisco's got it. The scoreless streak continues in the second half.
Yes, the scoreless streak in the second half continues, which I'll get to in a second. But first, we'll start with the number of the game. And Kamara comes into play here, 9.8. That's the expected points lost on 2 Alvin Kamara fumbles. Those are the 2 biggest plays of the game. That play there at the end, where they still had a pretty low chance of winning. I mean, they needed to score there, then hold it or onside kick or whatever they would decide to do, and then get the ball back again and then score another touchdown, and then they would have a chance to win. So, it's at the goal line. So there's something. There was some like inkling of hope, but not a whole lot going on there. But even earlier in the game, Kamara had another fumble, which actually ended up being the second most impactful play of the game. So the first is the fumble at the goal line as far as EPA lost. The second is actually, no, I'm sorry. That's wrong. The first fumble was actually the fumble he had earlier in the game, which was in the first quarter on 1st and 10 at the 41-yard line, was the most impactful play of the game. The fumble recovery there. And then the second most was this fumble on the goal line. San Francisco didn't have to do a lot offensively. Jimmy Garoppolo about flat EPA. He had a tipped ball that ended up being a touchdown that I'm sure everyone will point to and say, Jimmy stinks because of this. And it's good just to see the 49ers, they can win a whole bunch of different ways. And that's what they've been able to do with the dominant defensive performance. Now they have guys coming back and being healthy, or they can be somewhat dominant, pretty dominant offensively in some of these games like they were last week, which makes them one of the teams contending to be the best in the NFC right now. The Saints dropped to 4-8, but again, as I discussed, in the NFC South, anything is possible. San Francisco up to 7-4, separating somewhat from the Seattle Seahawks. They were 9-point favorites in this game. They amazingly cover, although they only scored 13 points. They win 13-0, adjusted score 23-16. And the scoreless streak that was mentioned in this one. So we have 4 straight games here for the 49ers defense where they have not allowed any points in the second half. That's the scoreless streak that they're talking about here. It's pretty hard to lose when you're not giving up points in the second half of any ball game. Implications for the playoffs in this one: San Francisco up to a 95% chance to make the playoffs, 88% chance to win the division, 19th hardest schedule going forward. So about a middling sort of schedule going forward. They are going to play against they got the Dolphins. That'd be a good game. Jimmy G versus the new Jimmy G. Shanahan versus Mike McDaniel. That'd be a great game. 4:05-1. So a good late game there for us. Are they flexing? Can we flex that maybe into primetime? So they'll be at home against the Miami Dolphins. Bucks next. So those are some interesting games. Seattle, that's a big game. Commanders, Raiders, Cardinals. Not a walkover sort of schedule here for the 49ers. So if they have some problems going forward, could be interesting. But I think they're pretty much locked in at least to make the playoffs. And then we'll see what they can do after that point. As far as the Saints are concerned, where are we now for the Saints and their chances to make the playoffs? 9% chance. So not bad. Again, hanging tough because they have a 7% chance to win that division. Even at 4-8, you can hang tough in that division. with Tampa Bay struggling so much. All right, before we get to Sunday Night Football, let's round it out here with the afternoon games. And in Kansas City, the battered and bruised Rams come to town, and the results are pretty much what you expected.
Perkins tipped at the line, and that's intercepted. Nick Bolton's got that to the 35. Still on his feet inside the 30. Dunlap got a piece. Bolton has his second interception in as many weeks, and the Chiefs, their fans.
Yes, I decided to highlight the defense for the Chiefs here. The offense was pretty good for the Chiefs, and I know they weren't exactly facing, great competition, the Chiefs defense, but they kind of helped seal the game here when the offense didn't, struggled a bit here. A very uncharacteristic end zone interception for Patrick Mahomes in the second half of this game. And if you look at what the Rams were doing, at least in the second half of this game, it was punt. They did score a touchdown in the second half to make it 20-10. But then after that, turnover. And then end of half, they didn't end up scoring on their final drive. So closing out with a couple of turnovers for this Chiefs defense. Let's get to the number of the game, 8.1, and that's expected points lost on third downs for the Chiefs. So this is what actually held their score down. Normally, they're the best team in the NFL converting on third downs. They're the best team in the NFL as far as adding expected points on third down. They're the best team this season, by far. Eagles are second on adding expected points on third and fourth down. In this game, they were negative 8.1. They lost a bunch of expected points on third down. You just don't see that happen very often for this team. So it's something to highlight and why the score ends up being, 26-10 in this game, a little bit closer than you might have thought. LA falls to 3-8. Their season is over. We'll see if Stafford ends up coming back or not. KC up to 9-2. They handle business. It doesn't affect playoff odds that much because they were already a 99% chance to make the playoffs. Now they're a 99% chance to win the division, 36% chance to go to the Super Bowl versus 24% for the Buffalo Bills, and 22% to win the Super Bowl, the best odds in the NFL. Anything else to point out in this one? Let's take a look. Pacheco continues to be the guy on the ground. 22 carries, 69 yards. Not a great average there, but they're just riding him right now. He did get one touchdown, so that's fantasy football players. If you're looking for something, that's what you're going to look for. A very well-distributed passing game for Patrick Mahomes. He had that bad interception that we mentioned, but was not sacked against this Rams defense, which appears to be laying down a little bit here. Jalen Ramsey looked completely lost on a early touchdown to Travis Kelce. But again, so just spread it out here. 4 catches for 57 yards for Kelce, 4 for 56 for MVS, 3 for 38 for Juju Smith-Schuster, 5 for 36 for Sky Moore, 2 for 26 for Justin Watson, and so on and so forth. In total, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different players who caught the ball for the Kansas City Chiefs in this game. Bryce Perkins, pretty tough spot here. He had, 76 net passing yards here on 26 dropbacks. Did have 44 rushing yards. He was able to do something there. Negative 0.3 EPA per play. Yeah, it's rough. It's rough out in these streets for the Rams, who are basically done for the year. And remember, they don't have their first round pick. That is property of the Detroit Lions, who are loving every single loss there, seeing those racking up because, again, we have the Texans at 1-9-1. Other than that, we have the Broncos at 3-8, the Steelers at 3-7, which we'll find out where they go to, the Bears at 3-9, and the Los Angeles Rams at 3-8. So the Rams are right in the mix to not the Rams. The Rams are right in the mix to have the second worst record in the NFL, especially if Stafford is shut down. And that means the Detroit Lions are right in the mix to get that pick because they're definitely a team that would want to use it on a quarterback. Steelers, they should want to use it on a quarterback, but I don't know if they will. The Broncos, probably not. Although maybe that gives them an out for getting out of that Russell Wilson contract, get a rookie in there on a rookie deal. Bears, maybe not, probably not. I don't know. So a lot of these other teams are not even necessarily looking for a quarterback who have the chance of getting that second pick. All right, let's go to Sunday Night Football. Eagles handle business at home in a shootout. I mean, just scoring galore, at least early in the game, against the Green Bay Packers.
Packers got to stop him. Sanders got it. And the Eagles are going to get this one.
Yeah, not the most exciting one here that I could find for a clip on this one. Miles Sanders closes out the game, runs out the clock at the end of the game. Jordan Love came in, made things interesting. He only had, 9 dropbacks. People are already talking about, maybe we should start Love for the rest of the season rather than Rodgers, see what you have, because he had a good game. I mean, it was 9 dropbacks in pretty much garbage time. There was never higher than a 5% win probability for the Packers in any of these plays near the end of the game, but I don't know. Well, whatever. We'll see what happens there. I'll talk about that a little bit more as part of this, but let's get to the number of the game. That's 16 expected points for Jalen Hurts added on scrambles and design runs. The second highest game of the season in that regard. I know Justin Fields has had some really, really high gains, but this was actually very impactful sort of plays when Jalen Hurts was doing it here. He only added 2.2 expected points on his passing when you net out sacks. So 16 running the ball, only 2 passing the ball in this game. Jalen Hurts, 157 yards rushing. Now, we're getting some crazy rushing games from quarterbacks this season. 9.2 yards per carry. But Miles Sanders also, let's not forget Sanders here, 21 carries for 143 yards, 2 touchdowns. Big fantasy week for Miles Sanders. Add 3 catches for 17 yards in there. 49 rushing attempts for 363 yards and 3 touchdowns for the Philadelphia Eagles. The Packers, I mean, one of the things, everyone's going to be talking about Aaron Rodgers, everything else, man, this Packers defense, come on. Like, you were supposed to be also a big part of the Super Bowl contention story this season, not coming through. I know Rodgers hasn't been great by any stretch. His grading has been okay. His efficiency has not been very good, though. But God, this defense has got to get something done. Rodgers shockingly picked twice in this game. And if you look at his numbers on this season versus prior seasons, he was someone that we meaning me, basically, complained about being too conservative in the past as far as his willingness to potentially throw interceptions. So let's look over the last number of seasons here for Aaron Rodgers. So we got Aaron Rodgers this year. Actually, let me make sure I filter out if he throws an interception on a penalty play. Okay, so let's filter those out. Rodgers this year, 9 picks. 9 picks already on 254 attempts. Last year, he had closer to 400 attempts in these other seasons. Last year, 4 picks, 5 picks the year before, 4 the year before that. Can we even get to a year? Is it possible to find, when was the last time Aaron Rodgers had 9 picks in a season? Let's go ahead and look back even further here. Yeah, we got nothing. We got 8 picks in 2015. So you got to go back way back early in his career, and 11 turnover-worthy plays this season, which matches his total from last season already. So he has a little bit of bad luck having so many of those turn into picks, but still a pretty interesting number for Rodgers in this game. Christian Watson had a very long 63-yard touchdown, which gives him 4 for 110 and 1 touchdown. He continues to have the highest touchdown to reception ratio, just an absurd number there. They actually ran the ball really well, Green Bay, but the scoring was just too much from Philadelphia. Aaron Jones ended up having 43 yards on 12 carries, so not great, but A.J. Dillon 64 yards on 8 carries in this game. Okay, so what are we going to do with Rodgers? You're going to hear buzz about adjusted score on this one, 30-25 Philadelphia, by the way. You're going to hear buzz, I think, about Jordan Love starting the rest of the season. Aaron Rodgers had some comments after the game that may have been interpreted like his heart's not in it, because he said as long as they haven't been eliminated from playoff contention, and at 4-8, they're not officially eliminated from playoff contention at this point, though we have them at a 6% chance to make the playoffs. So there's some hope maybe in the NFC. So he said, as long as we're not officially eliminated from playoff contention, I want to play. And people kind of took that as like maybe his heart's not in it. I think he was just saying because he's injured, because he has this rib deal now, that he wasn't going to necessarily put himself at risk like next week if they were already eliminated from playoff contention. And that makes some sense to me. I don't see how you bench the Hall of Famer here if he wants to play, if he's healthy. one of the top 10 greatest quarterbacks of all time. I don't think he's playing poorly this year. Yeah, he's been missing some open receivers, things like that, but it's kind of similar to what he was doing a number of years ago during that cold stretch from 2015 to 2019. It's not that different. He still has the physical ability and the talent. If he didn't have that, then I would agree for it. And the whole thing with Jordan Love, because he had 9 good plays in this game, I mean, I don't know. Are we really getting excited about Jordan Love? He didn't play at all as a rookie. He had, let me see, he's had any plays at all in 7 different games in his career. So in those games, he only has 2 games where he was kind of played a decent amount. One of them was against Kansas City where he started and Aaron Rodgers had COVID. His grading was awful in that game. Let's see, what was his grading in that game? He had a 30 grade in the one game that he started in Kansas City. EPA per play was actually not that bad, only -2, but a 30 grade, so not hot. He had 19 plays against the Detroit Lions in week 18 of 2021. 39 grade in that game. -0.4 EPA per play. So yeah, he had 9 good plays last night. Well, he had 4 awful plays against the Jets earlier this year and 4 okay plays against the Minnesota Vikings. And then the couple times where he had a chance to start, he completely flopped. And I don't have a total sense of this, but my read is the fact that he was seen as being, he wasn't even active really as a rookie. I don't think at all. He was never even active as the backup as a rookie. He's been awful whenever he's had a chance to actually play a game. They were very desperate to re-sign Rodgers and just give him, throw buckets and buckets and buckets of money at him, probably too much money at him. I don't know. Jordan Love probably stinks. So, I don't think he's a very good solution if there is any solution, which there may not be, for the Rodgers situation. And I don't think Rodgers is physically out of it, right? And, you want to keep your job if you're like LaFleur and you're Gutekunst, is that, am I saying that correctly? In the front office there, you want to keep your job, I think. I don't know if you can say, let's start a 2-year, potential rebuild, maybe have Jordan Love be our quarterback next year, probably stink again after stinking this year. I mean, you guys might all be fired if that's the case. Still got a better chance probably with Aaron Rodgers playing next year as long as he's not physically limited, and that does not appear to be the chance, where his cap number will be $31 million next year. It's high, but his, total completely destroy your cap numbers don't come into play until it gets over 40 million and then around 60 million in 2025. And then even if you do cut him or you trade him or you do whatever, Jesus, if you trade, who's going to trade for this guy? You have to trade him with a post-June. If you trade him with a pre-June 1st designation, it's a $100 million cap hit. If you cut him with a pre-June 1st, or he retires, let's say, I don't think he's retire. It's a $100 million cap hit. You lose $70 million on the cap. You can't really do that. You could do it post-June 1st, and you don't really lose anything on the cap. But no, I think it's just going to be a lot of meaningless talk about Jordan Love. I get it if you want to start it because Rodgers is injured and you have basically no chance of making the playoffs. That's fine. But any thought of moving on to him next year, I think, is a 2%, 3% probability type of event. And really, you're locked in here. The front office, the coaching, the team with Aaron Rodgers going forward. All right, I got to get out of here, guys. Hope you've enjoyed the wrap-up. We'll talk everything Monday Night Football a little bit tomorrow, Monday Night Football, but I'm going to talk to Seth Walder at ESPN Stats and Info Analytics guys over there about everything that he's seeing with all their new metrics over there. That'll be something that probably drops Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. Until then, appreciate everyone tuning in, and I'll be talking at you very soon, later this week. Thanks, guys.